Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your hosts, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. Our guest today is entrepreneur, author, and podcaster, Julie Perkins. Julie, thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to have you on the show.
Well, thank you both for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation for sure.
Absolutely. So before we jump in, for our listeners who may not have heard of your podcast or Wise Minds, tell us a little bit about your background and what really got you into this industry.
Well, to cut it short, I come from a very high-paced entrepreneurial family. So I was brought up with a lot of curiosity, an amazing amount of drive, and really that sort of feel that working and making something happen should be fun. You rarely hear an entrepreneur come in and whinge about their day. They're probably sort of wanting to be busier, but it's normally done with the next challenge, and it's all about making that change. And then I joined the family company, which is joint venture partnerships. It's a very shared ownership structure, so we don't officially own it. And came into the Netherlands in my late 20s to open up the brand over here. And I've been here ever since. And I had this incredible journey of ups and downs. And I loved every minute of it. I didn't achieve every minute of it, just to throw that in. But I learned from a lot of failures in order to understand what is that best way to open a business, knowing that the answer was there isn't just one way. So I decided 4 years ago to support women to grow their businesses forward. I heard too many frustrations and I thought, I could solve that if I just had a cup of coffee with you. And the rest is history. So, and an ongoing history, of course.
Of course. So tell us, kind of based on what's sort of led you into helping female entrepreneurs in particular, what are some of the biggest challenges that female entrepreneurs face versus something that a man might face in the same position and starting the same type of company?
Yeah. I mean, of course, wants to sort of be open about it, but there are some waves. And through my experiences, companies grow in a series of waves. We all know that. And one of my failures, which I'm very open about, is something associated with the way that we look at leadership, which has an incredible strength. It makes us very broad as women in terms of leadership and the way that we gather people. But the challenge is also something I experienced was, how do you let go effectively in a way that's comfortable for you? And that was something very much in early stage business, as I was in the Netherlands, is that you're in there and you're sort of bringing up in a way, an ugly baby. Nobody loves it. You're starting off and you're wanting to do it and you're nurturing it forward. And then as it grows, it tries to sort of escape your rather holding on techniques as it wants to go into a toddler teen and grow. But we hold on to it. And that's one of the very, very big challenges that I solve with women. And that is, how do you make yourself continually redundant on those growth waves so that you can get onto the next one effectively and not hold on? I held on, the company grew around me, and we started to chug. And it was exhausting for me and for everybody. So when I actually could release myself, make myself redundant, which I learned from a very close colleague of mine who told me so, I could actually reposition myself to do what I loved again and find that beautiful way of letting go. So that's number one error. And the other one I deal a lot with is our relationship with money. And also, I know we hear a lot about the fear of success, the fear of taking on, but it's more about the fear of success. What happens if we grow so big? What happens if we can't be there for our family? What happens if people see me as a poor member of society because I bring there? So from my experience, I'm making a very short story. I don't mean to put half the world in a box, but it's about the balance of those two things. And quite often when we can solve those in growing businesses, we've actually solved 80% of the issues towards successful growth and legacy, to quote part of the title of your podcast, is that we hold on and we're chugging and it's stuck. So if we can release these incredible women entrepreneurs from themselves, from their businesses, quite often they know all the answers. They know that there's no one that knows their business greater than a founder. So freedom space is a big thing. Long answer, sorry.
No, great answer. Stan, and I can tell your wheels are turning. What are your thoughts? What are your questions for
Yeah,
Julie?
yeah. So I want to drill into this and maybe do so at some risk here because I'm outnumbered. I'm not a girl. I'm not a woman, and I've never been one. So I don't have the perspective you guys have on this. I heard you talk about making yourself redundant. Nothing about that sounds gender distinctive. That's an issue that us guys have too, right? But
Right.
but when you started talking about the fear of success, I got the sense from you that maybe that's something that a lot of women have that, at least from your perspective, may be different from the way men look at the entrepreneurial experience. So I want to drill into this a bit so that women listening to this podcast and maybe men who listen to this podcast also would come away with a real clarity around that distinction. And if that's a distinctive liability, let's talk about it, and then let's talk about how you deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can use, obviously, I won't use real names, a couple of entrepreneurs that have come to me and they're wanting to grow. So you come and you have that first meeting and they want to grow. But actually, when you drill down, the blocks of them growing are the fears of a lot of things that are in their path, like their kids, their families, how they see their friends, how they see their position in society, themselves, not given by anybody else. And the problem and the challenge is, in order to solve that, you have to separate the founder from their current situation. And quite often, when we grow businesses, especially in those early stages, we've got friends, we've got family, we've got people volunteering, and we're grabbing people from left, right, and center to get our businesses going. And a natural trait of leadership of women is to gather people and to collect them. And they grow very, very good teams, that servant style leadership where they don't need that prominence, that affirmation. But the challenge is that what happens because you don't let go is you grow the business around you. So it comes about you and the business. Now, people, as you want to grow, they actually don't follow founders and leaders. We like to think they do, but they follow and are inspired by amazing ideas. So you have to separate the founder from their business. Now, the first thing to do that is to understand who you are. What's your personal purpose and values? And how do you translate that into your company to separate it but not let go? And that is absolutely important because then what happens is the founder starts talking in a different way. They talk about my business, what can my business do towards my vision, rather than what can I do? Because as soon as you say I, you're only as big as your day. You're only as big as the hours in your day. So that separation and them looking upon that journey rather than in it is the very, very first step. And they start to talk differently. And that is the first step to getting that power back, getting that control back. So first things first, who are you? And why do you do your business? You weren't born going, hey, I'm going to have a finance company. But the dots lead you to taking that choice. And that enables you then to go, right, who am I in all the other roles in my business? It separates you, so it gives you space.
Okay, I got that. So, do you have a process or a way of cracking that open so you help people discover what that purpose is?
Yep, absolutely. And that is about going back to the origin story, the origin of who you are, the journey that you've taken, what's the lens through life that you see. And that can be determined by things that are given to us by our parents or situations, but also our experiences. And what we do is we get them to go back, not in a dramatic way, but just to start thinking about the highs and lows in their lives. What were they feeling at the time? And that often stipulates or gives us the values that we feel. Why were we angry? Why did we challenge? Why were we happy with joy? And then we take that and understand what is joyful in life. What do they love doing? And that starts coming together as these purpose and values. And we basically, step by step, it's all online, do a process where they can begin to pull that together to their personal purpose and values. And quite often they'll start to see, so that's why I started my business and in the way that I do it. And then by translating the way that they do it in terms of the values of the organization, they start to really produce something incredibly unique that inspires others to follow. So they start to take them on a path, and that space helps them say, hey, your only job as a founder is to inspire others. Okay, you end up doing a lot more, but ultimately, you want to inspire people to believe what you believe and in the business sense. And it needs to be consistent in a way that other people can follow. And it's that alignment, it's that separation. And then like people gather. And that's the magic. They always go, oh my gosh, I've got more people and they're just like me. Well, yes, because you've defined what you are in your organization. So it will attract people like you. And then this idea of delegating doesn't become so fearful. So that's a first step for sure.
That's a conversation that you would have with your client in this case, right? And do you find, is it common that when you sit down with them initially, they don't really know that they don't really have clarity around this?
That's right. So we do a lot of stuff online. So it's intermittent with me and some of the other guides. But first of all, when I say list your values, so we just get the warm up. They'll use every dictionary value that there is, and they said, "But I'm everything," and I said, "You are, but you're more some than others." My friend, she's really big on trust, and of course, I like trust, but it's not as equal as my equality one. It doesn't mean she's not. So it's about looking at your top four, because your
Mhm.
top four will define how you take choices in life. And that's the question you're after. We're not judging you as a human. We all know that we've probably got most of them covered, but we want to know, how do you go about taking your choices? And that's what you want to translate into your company, not you exactly. So I love equality. What does equality mean for me? I believe that everyone's story should be told and heard. But obviously, I don't put that in Wise Minds. I translate it into every woman entrepreneur who wants to grow their business should. So that's my essence of me in my company, because and that's how you do it. And that's how I get space. And then, you look at your friends, your family, and you think, actually, I stand for that in all areas of my life. And that helps you find the balance, to be that person that you need to be in a wider sense. It's
Yeah. Well, something else I want to do here, and then Katie Beth, I promise I will let you have the microphone back. Okay. But I've read a little bit about you, and I know, I mean, you say something on your website. I think you talk about this in your book, and you recognize this, what's called the Pareto's rule, right?
yeah,
I guess the 80-20 rule. I am very curious, and I'm saying selfishly, personally, I'm very curious to hear you talk about how you help people discover what that 20% is so that you can offload that other 80% to other people who probably would do it better. I want to hear your thoughts about how you get there.
yeah. Well, I've just described is the bit that undoes the blocks, and then the rest comes upwards, and they're like, oh my goodness, I've got this. But we do it in order. So this is the order if we want to process, absolutely. Number one, who are you? And then how do you translate yourself into the purpose, the values of your company? What's your vision to change? And we call that the purpose grid. Once you've got that, the next big question is, who are you doing it for? And this is my favorite because when the entrepreneur says, they go, oh yeah, well, I know my customer. I know my customer totally. But quite often when you have discovered who you are, you understand that as you're developing your product, your service, your customer promise, you're doing quite a high percentage from your shoes. And that's something which you can cope with when you're just forming your business because it's about trial and error and experimenting. But when you want to grow your business, you have to have a prime customer because your prime customer is where your innovation goes, it's where your resources go, and it's where your message goes. And so that's a big thing to undo, is trying to transfer the hero being you. And when you open your business, everyone sees himself. I've got the message that's going to save everybody. You see yourself as the hero. It's transferring the baton. The hero is no longer you. You are the support cast, and the hero goes to your customer. And that is with the purpose and the values and the customer. Once they've done that, I'm quite happy if they say to me, right, I know it, because it's the release, and then it allows all the answers to come up. It's they're trying to do too many things, too many people. We like to save the world, and I say to them, "Oh, you want a niche or niche?" And they go, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to be small." I said, "A niche is Latin for to nest. It's just asking you to find a position to nest somewhere so that you know how to be heard. It doesn't mean you'll only see 6 people. The world's bigger than that."
Yeah.
That is certainly true. And it's interesting. So many things that you've touched on are things that are close to my heart and stands as well. For our law firm clients, we actually have a similar exercise where we have a list of 100 values and we have them sit down and pick 4 or 5 of those that they feel like they really, really connect with. And it's interesting. I've had the same experience, Julie, with our clients saying, oh, I like all of these. But well, of course, everybody wants justice. Everybody wants equality. Everyone has that, especially women I've seen tend to carry that fear of like, oh, what if they think I don't care about equality? No, we understand that. But it's very interesting. So that's an exercise that we do. And it's interesting as well with married couples that we have that come in and couples that have been together for a very long time. It's interesting when you say list out the values that you think define your family. Sometimes the values are not the same. And those couples have 2 very different views, sometimes because it's just how they're viewing it differently. And sometimes because one of them is viewing their family values as what they are, and one of them is talking about what they wish the family values were. So
Yeah.
it's always such an interesting exercise. And for all of our listeners, if this is not something that you've done before, we highly, and I'm speaking on behalf of Julie as well, we highly encourage you guys to take a few minutes and really define those values. Once you've defined your values, either as they are or the ones that you want for yourself or your children or your family, once you've done that, I would say that's a great first step in really figuring out the direction and your purpose as well. What are your thoughts? Have you ever had clients that come in and you do this value exercise and it's kind of mind-blowing, world-rocking, clarity-giving? Tell us a story about that.
Well, I have many stories because no one's ever answered the question before. 99% of people have never answered the question. They just go around and we're very externally motivated by what values we think we should have, even though we think no one's really asked us to dig deep. But quite often with young people, we have a lot of values around saving the world and making the world a better place. And when I ask them, what does that mean to them? That's when we start to delve in to the actual origin of the values of what they believe. And I help support most of the people are on sustainable products, and trying to understand that and moving into what it actually means for them, and coming to terms that not everybody wants to save the world in the way that they want to save the world. It's like I've just pulled off their arm. Honestly, I've broken their heart. And I said, it doesn't mean that people don't want to save the world, but not in the way that you want. And this is how we shift them from their shoes, their passion, their belief, and they're telling off this generation, which rightfully do, but, and say, how does that translate in a way that you can tell others? And that's about that separation, is that we all know plastic, we all know single-use plastic, and trying to work with one of the entrepreneurs about saying, it's got to be in my purpose, it's got to be in my purpose. And I go, but it won't motivate your customer in the way that it motivates you. So that was translating them from their shoes into, when you're so passionate about something, is a really tough journey. And you have to be strong. It's we we all love something that we can't believe that everyone else doesn't think the same as us. It's somewhere there, but they don't wake up every day going plastic free world, but it's there. So how do you bridge it so they will think of plastic free world? And I think that's the beautiful exercise of the values with the people I work with, is when they go, it's a penny drops, and they go, that's the bridge. And that's what you're looking for, the bridge from what you believe into something that attracts enough customers to you. And that translation is absolutely critical, because you've got to make sure there's enough people with your problem that you want to solve, right? Straight out.
Right. And I think you're dead on. It's interesting too with kind of the exercises we do with our clients. That's something we run into all the time, is kind of having to help people understand that their passion and their legacy may not be one that everybody connects with. Maybe it's a plastic-free world for someone, and maybe it's tackling homelessness, or maybe it is making sure all kids have a home, or ending the war in Ukraine. There are so many different, and I think that's great, helping people understand that we can all make the world a better place using the passion that we have and the purpose that we have and the skill set and the network and the resources that we have. You're tackling plastics while we're tackling something else. And so I think once you can kind of help bridge that gap and help everybody understand it, it takes all of us doing all of these different things. And so I love that that's an exercise that you walk your clients through. Okay, before we run out of time, because I've taken us down too many paths, I do want to take a minute and talk about your book, The Wyse Way. Tell our listeners a little bit about what inspired you to write the book and what they can expect.
The reason why I wrote the book was I had so many great founders come to me thinking that their current frustration or block was their own fault. And they come and say, I do this is what I feel, and it was a real thing coming on. And when I told them, I said, oh no, it's not your fault. It's that you're holding on to a growth wave too long, and the other great wave is trying to pass you and it's hitting you on the side of the head. And that's what's frustrating. I said, it's a normal pattern. You're exactly where you should be. There was such a relief that it wasn't their fault, that they went, oh my goodness. So I thought, what I'll do is I'll make this persona of Sophia, which actually is a persona of my own story about getting trapped. And then if you can find affinity and alignment with Sophia, your first problem's done. Oh, this isn't something that everybody suffers from. It's everybody does. It's not just me. And, there's alignment in adversity. People like it, going, oh, thank goodness I'm not the only one in pain. And when you realize that it's not just you, and that you can start working on the pattern to get you out of there, and it's easier than they think. And I sometimes think, gosh, if you found me 6 months ago, you wouldn't have had that pain for 6 months, because I could have just said, yeah, it's not you. It's just your company growing, and it's kicking you a little bit. It's trying to tell you something. And I go, oh, okay, what's it trying to tell me? Duh, duh, duh. Oh, okay, that makes sense. And then we can grow the business of it, of course. If only it was 5 seconds long. But the pattern is there. And when we realize it's not our own fault, and that was my motivation for writing Sophia. So people could sort of just read it on the website and just go, yeah, what I'm feeling is shared by many, many founders. Now, what do I do?
I love that. That's great. And certainly something I would say men and women entrepreneurs, and especially in those beginning stages of your journey, no matter if you're male or female, I feel like that's something that everyone runs into. And it's always so comforting when someone says, no, it's not just you, it's not your fault, and there's a fix for it. So I love that it kind of walks them through that journey in a very not in your face, not uncomfortable way. I take them through that character journey. So that's incredible. Tell us one final question. Through all of the work that you do, the work you've done previously and the work that you're doing with Wyse Minds, what is it that you hope your legacy will be, Julie?
I hope that every woman entrepreneur can find that growth in their business because they define what growth is to them. And that's a very important first step for anybody, because we get these headlines, I made 76 million overnight and woke up and there I was. They've gone through this huge journey and we get overwhelmed by it. But if you actually sit down and say, right, what is growth to me? What's that change that I'm trying to make? What you realize is it doesn't matter if it's your corner shop in your village or your town. You have to find the change that you want to make. And my mother taught me this very well. I said to her once in an interview, which you can read on listen to on the website. I said, what letter would you have written to your founding self today from where you are? And at the moment, they run a company in 14 countries with 3 billion. And she said, I would never have told her how big it was going to be. She would have been terrified. And that summarizes what it means. It's going, define your vision of change. Don't make it, the size is not important. What is important is the fulfillment of the difference that you make. And of course, you want to be successful, but don't get caught up in these headlines. Ask yourself when you see them, what can I learn from that story I can use? Don't get caught up in the headline. That's just what sells papers. It doesn't need to be yours.
Yes, I love that. The front page story isn't always everyone's story, which is interesting. Is there anything that we didn't discuss that you would like our listeners to know about?
Oh, my goodness. I've loved the variety of conversations and, to be able to talk from the heart about people I've worked with, because they're all true stories, has just been a blessing. And obviously, because I'm in Amsterdam, I'm coming to the end of my Tuesday. But so it's a fabulous way to end. So big thank you. Wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we enjoyed it. And for all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. This has been the Legacy Leaders Podcast with your hosts, Stan Miller and Katie Beth Hand. And our guest today is Julie Perkins. For more information on Julie and all of the work that she does, you can visit wyseminds.com. That's WYSE minds.com. And we will also link that for you in the show notes. Julie, thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.